Shalom, Hebrews and Shebrews. My name is Noel Joshua Hadley. This is the Unexpected Cosmology. You know, the great thing about playing a trailer like that is that like you click that button and there's no going back. It's like when that thing ends, I'm live. Here we are. There's no, pausing to think about what I'm going to say. But I have with me today Jennifer Hartz. She is a TEIA TEPHI expert, researcher, and writer. Welcome, Jennifer Hartz. As everybody saw out there, that was the trailer for her book, and we'll be covering her research and her the book she just released on TEIA TEPHI. So welcome, Jennifer.
Hey, Noel. Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so go ahead and let's just break right into it. The best best policy here is just to break right into it. So tell us about yourself, any pertinent information, when you were born, what the weather was like. Just take us through it, and we'll go right into it.
Well, real quick about me, I live about an hour outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I woke up to Torah about 2010. So I was sort of in that first wave of people that came in the 2009, 2010 era. And I am a writer and teacher. I usually teach teenagers, so middle school, high school age. And I've been writing fiction for 15 years. When my publishing company that I had been working for closed, that really took a lot of the wind out of my sails. When I first heard about TEIA TEPHI, I was listening to a show of Rob Skiba, and he actually had, so this is several years ago, he had Jake Grant on there, and Jake just sort of off the cuff mentioned Jeremiah taking the daughters of King Zedekiah, out of Jerusalem when the siege of Jerusalem occurred because Babylon was attacking. He took them to Egypt. And then there's a legend that says that Jeremiah took them from Egypt to Ireland. And I thought that would make an amazing story. But at the time, I wasn't really writing much. My daughter had just been born and I was homeschooling my son. So I just had so much on my plate and I kept pushing it to the back burner. But you know how God works. He kept nudging me and I kept hearing about this princess. And I was like, knew I needed to dive into it. Around the same time, Dr. Stephen Pidgeon was teaching about the dispersion of the northern tribes of Israel. And I always found that subject very, very fascinating. And he showed the etymology of how the landmarks and the cities, pointing out that the languages and the names of things hinted at the patriarchs from the tribes that were named after. And he even mentioned this Judean princess that was in Ireland. And I said, okay, it's time to dive in and study this.
What was interesting when you mentioned Jake Grant is I could imagine when you said that, I could imagine Jake Grant actually giving that information. And of course, I guess you're kind of the same class then as Rob Skiba, because he was, he was about 2009. I think he was.
Yeah, I found him right away, and what a blessing he was. I miss Rob so much. I followed him all the way through, even through the flat Earth stuff and everything. So I definitely miss Rob, and always pray for his family because of what happened.
Yeah, Rob Skiba is what I won't give my testimony right now because this is your research, but Rob Skiba is the one who personally led me to the Torah as well over the phone. So I'm very grateful to him. But anyways, yeah, let's get into this. TEIA TEPHI, let's hear it.
So TEIA TEPHI. So shortly after deciding, all right, I'm going to dive into this, I found a book called The Book of TEPHI. This was a book that was translated into the English in 1897 by J.A. Goodchild as sung by the Irish bards. So he's translating it from the Irish bards actually singing it. It's in the style of an epic poem, sort of similar to Beowulf, if you had to read that in high school. And it's essentially TEPHI's account of what happened as if it was written by her. So when I say, TEPHI says, I'm referring to how in her story, it's basically coming from her point of view in the Book of TEPHI. This book is absolutely beautiful. It's in the public domain, so you could probably find a copy on the internet if you don't want to actually purchase one. And it's a fantastic read. At the same time I was diving into this research, I was also studying world mythology because I was going to teach that at a homeschool co-op. And when I hit the Celtic mythology, what was amazing is that the names in Tephi's story and in Celtic mythology were the same. And I'm like, okay, so what's going on here? And I came to find out after researching this that the Tephi story is almost an exact match to the Second Battle of Moytoira. And I'm going to pause here and just say that when I was studying this and researching this, I looked up how to pronounce these Gaelic names. I'm still probably going to butcher them, so please excuse me. But I'm pretty sure that's how you say Moytoira. It's actually spelled mag-tired, but it's Moytoira.
Well, in confession, now you know what channel you're on here, and I butcher basically everything. And but
Right.
in full confession, we were of course talking about this beforehand, and I was asking you, how do you pronounce TEIA TEPHI? And I was pronouncing it Tepi. And I don't want to, give a different pronunciation from you, but you were even saying that, all these names, there's dozens, if not probably hundreds of different variations out there. So, yeah. So, I mean,
especially with TEIA TEPHI in the mythology, she is very obscured, and I'll cover that later. But some of the names that were like directly the same, I mean, it was the same across the board from Tephi's story to the Second Battle of Moytoira. And what I found really fascinating about the Celtic mythology, as opposed to like the Greek or the Egyptian, was that the Celtic mythology, these characters, these gods, were very terrestrial. They lived out their lives on earth, whereas we know with like the Greek, they had a celestial life. They were living in the heavens, and every now and then they would come down and interact with the people. But the Celtic gods were definitely on earth, living out these lives. And it led me to believe, and I think several others, that these were actual real people. They were real people who, if you remember in the beginning of the Lord of the Rings, where Galadriel is giving that long speech about the ring, where she says that, and some things that should not have been forgotten were lost. History became legend, legend became myth. I truly believe that's what happened with Tephi, was that her real actual history morphed over the years into a legend, and then eventually the myth. And they started calling these people gods. In the Second Battle of Moytoira, you have these two warring factions. You have the Fomorians and you have the Tuatha De Danann. There's speculation on who these people actually are. The Fomorians, some people could argue that they were like Phoenician sailors, because the Fomorians they acted very much like pirates. They were lords of the sea. It was said that they came out of the water. So were the Phoenicians? I'm not so sure. My main focus right now, though, is on the Tuatha De Danann. And who were the Tuatha De Danann? Well, it's my theory, and several other people, scholars, hold the same theory, that this was the tribe of Dan, the Israel tribe of Dan. And it's not just because their name sounds the same. Tephi confirms this in her book, the Book of Tephi. They are the tribe of Dan. The Tuatha De Danann is the tribe of Dan. I know Dr. Pigeon in his research also agrees with the same thing, and many scholars make the same connection. Now, however, I will say that there are just as many scholars that say that this is not the case. Some say because of the high technology that the Tuatha De Danann had, that they had to be like ancient aliens. In my opinion, people like that are going to be Bible deniers, and anything that might highlight the Bible as actually being true, they're going to say, oh, that can't be the case. So there must be ancient aliens, or, remnants from Atlantis, which, okay, that might be true coming into, new light about Atlantis and all of that. But again, my opinion is Tuatha De Danann is the tribe of Dan. Throughout Tephi's story, she worries that people are going to deify her. And she says that on several occasions. She doesn't want the people to make her into some kind of god. And in fact, when she died, she had her brother create festival games that would take place every year on the anniversary of her death, so that people would remember she was just a mortal queen and not some kind of god. But unfortunately, it does seem like the Tuatha De Danann became the gods of Celtic mythology.
That's actually really interesting, because you see the same thing happening. And I don't know if you've ever read it, but of course we have the travels of Noah into Europe, and we see the same things happening where Noah and his 3 sons, they start becoming even though they were mortals on the earth, they actually become gods. And you actually see Noah deified in Greek mythology. And of course, Ham became any number of different gods and his children. But yeah, I was just thinking of that as you were talking about that with TEIA TEPHI and in Ireland. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah.
No, you're fine. Now, I will say before I dive a whole lot into TEPHI, I think it's important to hit some biblical history so that people get on the same page. Now, Noel, I know your audience is going to be familiar with all of this stuff, but there could be some new people. So we're just going to run through it really quickly. I'm going to start at Abraham. Abraham was the father, and God made so many promises to Abraham. And then Abraham had Isaac, who was the son of that promise, and the line continued through Isaac. And then Isaac had the twin sons, Esau and Jacob. And Esau was the firstborn. So that line of promise, those promises that were given to Abraham from God down through the line should have gone to Esau. But as we know, Jacob sort of usurped that and got the right of the firstborn, got the blessing from Isaac. And that birthright, that's really, really important. The birthright or those promises that God made to Abraham flowing through that bloodline. After Jacob usurps Esau, he's going to run for it. And he's going to go and live with Laban. And as he's going on that journey, he stops. And this is the story of Jacob's ladder, which we're all familiar with. You know, Jacob, he takes a nap and he has this dream about a ladder reaching to heaven. And he sees the angels ascending and descending on this ladder. And this happens in Genesis 20. Verses 10 through 22. I'm not going to read all of those verses for the sake of time, but there's a couple that I highlighted that I wanted to share. And so Jacob went out from Beersheba and went toward Haran. And he lighted upon a certain place and tarried there all night because the sun was set. And he took of the stones of that place and put one for a pillow and lay down in that place to sleep. And skipping ahead a little bit, God said, he has the dream, and God says to him, and thy seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and thou shalt spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And in thee and in thy seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed. And Jacob says, surely the Lord is in this place, and I knew it not. And then in the morning, Jacob arose, and he took the stone that was his pillow, and he set it up for a pillar, and he poured oil on top of it. And he called the name of the place Bethel. And this stone which I have set for a pillar shall be God's house, and of all that thou shalt give me, I will surely give a tenth unto thee. So here we see, this is the only time, I believe, and I could be wrong, but this is the only time that a stone was anointed. And this stone becomes very important in this story. This is called Jacob's pillar. It is called the stone of destiny. It's called the Leafale in the Irish. It's called Jacob's pillow. It's called the Bethel stone, which, as we know, Bethel means house of God. Mm-hmm. And actually, this is the term TEIA TEPHI uses most often, is the Bethel stone in her story. So the stone, this particular stone in scripture, it crops up several times while Jacob is making a prophecy concerning Joseph. This is when Jacob is going to die and he's in Egypt and he blesses all of his sons. He's talking to Joseph. And Joseph is the one who's going to carry the birthright forward, even though it passed over Reuben and Simeon and Levi, and we know the reasons there, but he's blessing Joseph, and he says, he stops partway through the blessing and says, from thence is the shepherd of the stone of Israel. And some people might think that that's Yeshua, but as we know, Yeshua didn't come from Joseph's line. He came from the line of Judah. So it's my opinion that this stone is actually referencing the Bethel stone. The Bible doesn't tell us at what point that Jacob went back and got the stone, or if he took it with him to Laban, but this stone is very, very important. And there's many references in the Bible concerning the stone, and I'm not going to go into them all right now for the sake of time, but eventually this stone is believed to be the coronation seat for the kings of Israel. And like I said, I'm not going to go over those, but a great reference is Jacob's Pillar by Ephraim and Campt. And it goes over all of those references of where the stone is biblically and what happened to the stone. So that's a great reference if anybody wants to look into that. So from there, we know that Jacob went to Laban and he ended up having these 12 sons. And I'm skipping a whole lot of stuff there for the sake of time. But he had the 12 sons, and these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and they are listed there on the screen. From there, we know that Jacob goes into Egypt. And we know the whole story of Jacob becoming his brothers sell him into slavery, and he goes into Egypt and then eventually becomes second to Pharaoh. But partway through that narrative is an interesting story about Judah. And Judah had this wife for his sons named Tamar. He married the first son and he died. And then he married Tamar to the second son and he died. And he did not marry his third son to Tamar. Instead, Tamar, in a way, tricks Judah into impregnating her. And I'm skipping over all kind of details here. But because from that, she has twins. And there is Pharez and Sarah. And as we know, Zerah put his arm out first during the birth, and the midwife wrapped a red thread around Zerah's arm, and he pulled it back in, and then Pharez was born first. Now, Pharez is the line that goes to King David and eventually to Yeshua. But Zerah, having broken the matrix, broken the womb, should be in the line of kings also. And we're going to find out that he actually is in the line of these kings. Skipping ahead some, all of the Hebrews go down to Egypt and they become enslaved there. And during a time of the Exodus, Moses is going to take those Hebrews out of Egypt. We're all familiar with the story. However, what most people aren't familiar with is that not all the Hebrews left with Moses. Some of them left by a different route. Some of the Hebrews left Egypt and sailed across the Mediterranean Sea to Greece. A Greek historian, I may butcher the name, Hectasis, he says that the Egyptians, formerly being troubled by calamities in order that the divine wrath might be averted, expelled all the aliens gathered together in Egypt. Of these, some under the leaders of Tannis and Cadmus migrated into Greece.
No, I don't want to. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead and finish your quote.
Oh, that was the end of the quote.
I was waiting for a pause there. So I'm curious, just in your research, if you have, just a side note, have looked into any of the Druids perhaps originating from the Hebrews in Egypt as well.
I did not come across any of that, but I wasn't really on that path.
Yeah. Okay. I was just curious because in the, and I'm just going off what you talked there about Greece, in the missing book of Acts, Acts 29, which actually you mentioned Dr. Pigeon, he actually included in the Sefer, he inserted that back into Acts, which I love. And it's a perfect, because in all the other books of Acts, it just cuts off. I think it's chapter 28. And it's like, well, what happens, right? And it's just like, it was never finished. But then you have Acts 29 and Paul goes to Britain and he meets the Druids. And the Druids actually mentioned that they actually are Jewish and that they came out of Egypt. And then you see the same thing in the Colburn Bible, in the book of the Sons of Fire. They say specifically that they came out of Egypt. And so after the Exodus, during the whole Exodus time, they actually came up that way into Europe. So I was just kind of curious if you'd run across that, but anyways, proceed.
Yeah, I'm sure I probably years ago heard Dr. Pigeon talking about that, but that's excellent confirmation that is in fact where many of them went. And they were of the line of Zerah. The descendants of Zerah were Zimri, Ethan, Herman, Kakol, and Darda. And from Darda's line comes Dardanus, or Dardus, son of Darda, the Egyptian, who he actually founded Troy. And from Kakol's line comes Cecrops, who founded the city of Athens. So we have, even though Zerah didn't lead the Hebrews in Moses as Pharez did, his line still becomes kings in Greece and in Troy. And some of the people of that group, they as you said, they migrated everywhere. And like, that's where Zaragoza in Spain comes from because of the line of Zerah. Now, meanwhile, we've got the other Hebrews going into the wilderness and Mount Sinai. And here's the $100 question. How many tribes were at the base of Mount Sinai when Moses went up to get the 10 commandments? It was all 12 tribes. I mean, technically you could say it was more if you divide Ephraim and Manasseh, but for sake of argument, it's going to be 12. There
12 plus a double portion. Yeah.
Right. Now it's more than just the tribe of Judah. And people mistakenly think that Jew equals Israel and Israel equals Jew. And that is just not the case. The Jews were of the tribe of Judah. They only made up one tribe. There were all the other tribes that made up all of Israel. I mean, we could talk about in Revelation how they talk about those who say they are Jews and are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan. I'm not going to go down that route because that would take
funny. It's funny what you had just said between you and me is just like so trivial. But I'm sure you might have a similar experience. I have probably stated more times than anything else to tell people, you do realize that the people of the Old Testament were the Jews, right? And they just look at you like, what are you talking about? It's like, you know that there were 12 tribes and that only one of them was Judah, right? And you see that look on their face. They gloss over like they'd never actually heard that before. So
it's the cognitive dissonance. They just can't get past that.
Right. Well, I mean, it's just I just wanted to state there that again, like for me, that's just those are the kind of conversations we have day in and day out. Mm-hmm. It's like we know that there's all these tribes. I just wanted to point that out to anyone out there that, yeah.
Right. There's all these other tribes. It's not just Judah. So the people from the tribe of Judah are Israelites, but not all Israelites are Jews, and we cannot use those terms interchangeably because they're not interchangeable. All of the tribes at Mount Sinai joined into covenant with Yah. This was essentially a marriage covenant. In Isaiah 54:5, your maker is your husband. They basically are exchanging marriage vows at Mount Sinai. And
also to point out to anyone out there, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you
off.
Oh,
no, you're fine.
You got me thinking, and I just want to point out to anyone out there that Judaism is not it is not Mount Sinai. Right. Yes. People go all the time. It's like, what are you, a Jew? And it's like, no, I'm actually keeping to the covenant of Mount Sinai. And Judaism is a separate religion that came from the Pharisee denomination that then became the religion of during the first century.
Yeah. And mostly they use the Babylonian Talmud as their book and not the actual Torah.
Correct. There is no Torah apart from the Talmud. Yeah. According to Judaism. Yeah.
According to them. Right. Most of us, we're going to follow, well, what we want to do is follow the Torah. So basically this marriage covenant, Yahweh is saying, if you follow my commandments, I will protect you and you will prosper. If you break my commandments, then curses will fall upon you. That is essentially the vows of the marriage covenant. All the tribes, all 12 are now in covenant with Yahweh, with the exception of the Israelites who went a different direction at the Exodus. They're not in the covenant. But there are promises that are still on them because they are from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then all the tribes, they go into the promised land, and then we come into the time of the judges, and a pattern starts to emerge. Yah gives his covenant. These are the instructions, which is the Torah. The people agree to walk in the covenant. Then the people rebel from the covenant. Prophets are sent to try to steer the people back into Yah's instructions. And then the prophets are ignored. They're stoned and all the horrible things that happened to the prophets. Isaiah was sawed in half. And then Yah, because the prophets were ignored, Yah sends his judgment. The people repent and agree to walk in covenant again. And then the pattern just keeps repeating over and over and over again.
Story of the Bible.
Yeah. After a while, Israel asks for a king. They don't want to just keep living under the judges. They want an actual king because that's what the nations around them are doing. And we know that they get Saul, and then David comes along, and then Solomon. But Yah gives a warning before giving them the king. He warns them that a king will take from them and tax them. Lots of taxes. And you can read about what God says there in 1 Samuel 8, 10 through 22. We get to Solomon. And Solomon, despite being the wisest man ever, he messes up a bit. He greatly taxes the people. That's in 1 Kings 4, 7 through 19, and 4, 22 through 28. This is where Solomon is taxing the people. He also takes on about 700 wives and 300 concubines. And these are, foreign wives. They turn Solomon's heart away from Yah, and he follows other gods. So despite having all this wisdom, and we know that Solomon was incredibly wise, he let his wives steer his heart away from God, and he started to fall into deep idolatry, so much so that he was, sacrificing his own children. In 1 Kings 11 through 13, God basically tells Solomon what is going to happen because of how he failed here. Since this has been your practice, and you have not kept my covenant and my statutes that I have commanded you, I will surely tear the kingdom from you and will give it to your servant. Yet for the sake of David your father, I will not do it in your days, but I will tear it out of the hand of your son. However, I will not tear away all of the kingdom, but I will give you one tribe to your son for the sake of David my servant and for the sake of Jerusalem that I have chosen. So here we see that the kingdom is going to be divided. And this happened, Solomon's son, Rehoboam, around 930 BC, 10 tribes in the north, separated from the 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin, in the south. In the north, this became known as the kingdom of Israel, or also the northern kingdom, and even the kingdom of Ephraim. And I believe it was called the kingdom of Ephraim because their first king, he was from the kingdom of Ephraim, Jeroboam. And then in the south, again, we have Judah and Benjamin, and that became known as the kingdom of Judah. So you have the kingdom of Israel in the north. These are all the 10 tribes up there. Then the 2 kingdoms in the south are the kingdom of Judah. This is where the Jews are still in the kingdom of Judah. They're down in the south. So when Rehoboam came into power, there was this great discontent because of the heavy taxes. We're going to be talking about taxes a lot, so keep that in mind. Taxing the people is not part of God's plan. And the kingdom is separated. The kings of the kingdom of Israel in the north were very corrupt, and they participated in a lot of pagan idolatry. They set up a golden calf up there. It was just a big hot mess up there. And so prophets were sent. This is the time of Elijah and Elisha and Amos and Hosea. But of course, as we know, the prophets were ignored. And according to the pattern that we laid out, Yah is going to send his judgment soon, and that judgment comes in the way of the kingdom of Assyria. But before that even happens, God divorces the northern kingdom. They are no longer a part of the marriage covenant. They are completely divorced. So they cannot be in this covenant with Yahweh anymore. Now, fast forward all the way to Yeshua's time. Yeshua is the one who makes a way for the northern kingdom to be able to come back. And he even says, I have not come but for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. As passionate as I am about the northern kingdom being able to come back, I'm not going to go down that too much. I would highly encourage everyone to look up Rob Skiba's work on the Ephraim awakening. He goes into beautiful detail on that. You can find Rob Skiba, Ephraim awakening. So at the same time that the northern kingdom is dispersed, Assyria attacks them and takes away many of the people. The lower estimates say that it was about 13,000 people from the northern tribes that got taken into Assyria. The higher estimates are as many as 200,000 people got taken from the northern tribe up to Assyria. And so now these people, these northern Israelites, they become assimilated into the Assyrian culture, and they begin to forget their identity altogether, that they are of the tribes of Israel. The scattering further continues when about 100 years later, Babylon sacks Assyria, and the northern tribes that were in Assyria are scattered. They go, many of them go over the Caucasus Mountains and into Europe, Eastern and Western Europe, and they just scatter from there. And this was all prophesied by God. He said, I'm going to scatter them everywhere. At the same time, later, it was about 200 years later, I believe. 200 years later is the fall of Jerusalem. So Jerusalem and the southern kingdom, the kingdom of Judah, were having problems of their own. So unlike the kingdom of Israel, the kingdom of Judah occasionally had a righteous king. Not many, but there were some, like Jehoshaphat, Hezekiah, and Josiah.
You can count them on one hand.
Yes. Josiah is actually TEIA TEPHI's grandfather, and he was a righteous king. But after Josiah died, his sons were not righteous. And this was the time of great upheaval. The kingdom of Judah warred with both Egypt and Babylon. And for over the course of 23 years, there was 4 different kings that were interchanged, because Nebuchadnezzar would come in and say, nope, you're not king anymore. We're going to put this one on the throne. And they were basically almost becoming like a vassal state of Babylon. This is also the time when Daniel was taken into Babylon and Ezekiel went into Babylon. And there were so many Judeans that became exiled over into Babylon. And then in 586 BC, and of course, this is, with dates, we can never be too sure, but Nebuchadnezzar sacks Jerusalem. Jeremiah had been preaching repentance in Jerusalem at the time. And of course, the people didn't listen. So here is the judgment of Babylon on the southern kingdom of Judah. King Zedekiah was king when the siege on Jerusalem occurred. This is Tephi's father. He actually has to watch his sons be slaughtered, and then he has his eyes removed from his head before he's carted off to Babylon to die. It's not a good time. But he had abandoned TEIA TEPHI, and from the research, 2 sisters. So you had 3 daughters of Zedekiah altogether. And this is where TEIA TEPHI's story starts. The book of Tephi opens with her lineage of being of the house of David, and how she's a daughter of kings and a princess of Zion. And after this opening, and it's very short, but after this opening, it immediately goes into the siege and how she's alone and she's so afraid. But Jeremiah, actually, the prophet Jeremiah, comes to rescue her. Now, what's interesting is Tephi never mentions him by name, but she describes him. She said that this prophet is feared and hated of the kings, which we know Jeremiah was hated by Zedekiah. And she also referred to him as the prophet and the great prophet. All throughout Tephi's book, she's always referring to him as the prophet. Jeremiah takes her to hide in a cave under the holiest place where the Ark of the Covenant and the Bethel Stone and other treasures from the temple were hidden. This also includes the harp of King David is there. They hide for 3 days until Baruch, and she does actually name Baruch. He comes to let them know that the siege is over. Baruch, as is in the Bible, he was Jeremiah's scribe, and he actually has books accounted to him, and they are not in the canon, but they are like 1st and 2nd Baruch are listed in the Apocrypha.
The 2nd Baruch is phenomenal.
Oh,
what are your thoughts on the cave? Again, this might be taking you off somewhere else, but you'd mentioned the cave that she was hidden in with the Ark of the Covenant and David's harp and so on and so forth. What are your thoughts on Ron Wyatt's find? Do you think that that's the cave, or do you think it's somewhere else?
I actually touched on Ron Wyatt a little bit later. I never really fully bought into Ron Wyatt's discovery. I felt like there was quite a few holes to that story and what was actually presented to the public. But I don't think that was the cave that Ron Wyatt found, because it's said to be under the temple. And Tephi said that it's under the holiest place. So it would be under the temple, where I believe Ron Wyatt was saying that it was under the Golgotha, right? Where he said he found the ark.
Well, then the next question then, yeah, he actually found it right under the Mount of Skulls there. So next question then, would you say the cave is under the present Temple Mount? Or are you okay? So that's a big no. Okay.
No, I think that's the Fortress Antonia. Because I mean, Yeshua even said not one stone would be remaining. So I
wasn't trying to like lead the witness or anything like that. I was just curious. So you would say that it would be over on what they say is Mount Zion now across that little valley there, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So okay. The Bible actually references Jeremiah and the daughters of Zedekiah several times. The best places to look for it are going to be in the book of Jeremiah, chapters 39 through 46. So there's your references if you want to check that out at some point. The biblical narrative about Jeremiah taking the daughters of King Zedekiah, they go to Mitzpah first before they go into Egypt, and a whole lot of stuff unfolds there. Tephi only mentions it briefly in her book, and you get the feeling that she is very bothered by what happened there. She says that they had hoped to dwell in Mitzpah safely, but the servant of God was slain, and this is Gedaliah. He was killed by Ishmael. She says that she doesn't need to talk about this because people can read about it in the prophet's book. So she's actually directly referencing the reader back to the book of Jeremiah, and Jeremiah goes into great detail of it. She mentions that it is a time of great tumult and that they have to flee to Egypt, and which is exactly what happens in the book of Jeremiah. Now, I will say that since Tephi was pretty silent on what happened to her there, I took some creative liberties when I wrote my fictional novel, Emerald Queen, The Tale of TEIA TEPHI. And I made what happened to her in Mitzpah incredibly traumatic, as if she hadn't gone through enough, surviving the siege on Jerusalem. But, I took the creative liberties there. But I do feel that what I wrote added to Tephi's strength and courage for later in her story. And it, if I do say so myself, it makes a beautiful contrast to what happens when she meets her future husband. Now, the biblical narrative, Jeremiah takes the daughters of Zedekiah to Egypt. And in Egypt, Pharaoh Hophra adopts Tephi as his very own, and he calls her his daughter. And during the 2 years that she lived there, he gives her a palace that came to be known as the Palace of the Daughter of Judah. And this is in Tannis. I might be pronouncing that wrong, but this is which later became Tannis. And this is where we get the story of Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. That's where they believe that the Ark went in Indiana Jones. It was in Tannis because Jeremiah went there. It's an interesting fiction, The Raiders of the Lost Ark is a great, great movie.
Well, it's kind of interesting too, because I was just thinking about this before you mentioned it, that, obviously I'm right on board with you that Jeremiah made it up to Ireland. I think you have him go up to Ireland, correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it would only make sense that within rabbinical Judaism today, and I think this is why it was important to point out earlier that modern rabbinical Judaism is not the same Hebrew Israeli faith of the Old Testament, but they would want to cover the tracks of this because they don't, if they recognize that this stone that you were talking about earlier, and I'm sure you'll bring it up again, and of course, Jeremiah, TEIA TEPHI or whatever went all the way up to Ireland. It no longer validates them as the sole authority, right? If there was an actual, so I wanted to point out that there is only one. It's not really a book. I don't even know what it is. It's almost like an ancient list of how the prophets died. I can't remember what it's called. It's only like a page or two long, but they actually specifically mentioned that Jeremiah died in Egypt. Mm-hmm. And I find that really interesting because it's like they have to end the trail there. The trail has to go cold there. It can't continue on because once again, that would validate a kingdom of Israel elsewhere that is, well, I'll let you continue.
Yeah, it is essentially valid. So the book of, as you said, the book of Jeremiah actually ends in Egypt, and Jeremiah prophesies that Babylon is going to come and conquer Egypt. And that actually does happen approximately 2 years after Jeremiah makes the prophecy. And despite Jeremiah's warning, Tephi's sisters, according to the book of Tephi, desire to stay in Egypt. And here there's an interesting footnote by J.A. Goodchild. He says that there's some discrepancy in the translation. On one hand, the sisters die in Egypt, but on the other hand, the sisters pop up again later in Ireland, and he's not sure exactly what happened. So I took some creative liberties here. And even Tephi talks about her sisters dying on the same day, and they were mummified. And then she talks again about how 5 people leave Egypt, herself, Jeremiah, Baruch. And who are these other 2 people? If her sisters pop up again, are they her sisters? Are they servants? So we're not exactly sure. And, I took creative liberties, and you're going to have to read Emerald Queen to find out what I did there. But in the book of Tephi, Baruch learns about passage to Tarshish. And scholars differ on where Tarshish is actually located. So Tephi gives a description. She says that it is northward and westward from Egypt. It's past the Pillars of Hercules, which the Pillars of Hercules are Gibraltar, and then the Horn of Africa on the other side, that small passage into the Mediterranean. There's endless water on the west, and you have Iberia, or the Iberian Peninsula, and this is where Brogan dwells. Present day, where Brogan dwells, present day Brogan is a Corona, Spain. So according to Tephi, Tarshish is Spain. Now I know people differ on this. I'm going to agree with Tephi. I think Tarshish is probably Spain, which means the Isles of Tarshish can be seen from Spain. And you can see Ireland from Spain on a clear day. It's approximately 650 miles. We're not going to talk about the curvature argument there. We're just going to pass that right up, because how can you see 650 miles away? But okay, so the Isles of Tarshish are going to be Ireland and England.
Well, gravity allows you to.
Sure, it's a mirage.
Yeah,
it's going to definitely be a mirage.
So I did not know this. So your position is that Ireland is Tarshish.
It's one of the Isles of Tarshish. I think Spain is actually Tarshish, but the Isles of Tarshish are those islands.
Well, I'm really enjoying this because I took a lot of heat last about a year ago. I came out with my my research on Atlantis and so on and so forth in Tarshish. And my main position was that Tarshish was Spain. And in fact, they've basically done some archaeological work there and found these rings, which happens to be exactly where, by the way, Plato mentions Atlantis.
Yes.
And my position was that Tarshish was basically a spinoff of Atlantis, or part of a confederacy of places that was Atlantis. When I came out with that, which I was just going with kind of the scholarship that you're agreeing with as well, I had a bunch of people coming out and arguing, and no, and Tarshish is in India and these different places, and so yeah, I'm enjoying this. This is good. So keep going.
Okay, so Tephi is going to leave Egypt, and they are going to go to Tarshish. And the reason, or the Isles of Tarshish, and why they want to go there is Baruch learned that the Tuatha De Danann are there, and they want to go to where the tribes of Israel actually are. And a few more things happen in Egypt. They still have the Bethel Stone with them. They still have the temple treasures, which would be quite possibly the Ark and the Harp of David. And actually, Jeremiah and Baruch anoint Tephi as the queen of Judah on the Bethel Stone before they go out of Egypt. And then when they leave Egypt, their first stop is Carthage, which is present-day Tunisia. The ship's captain, he's quite a character, even in Tephi's book, so he was a lot of fun to write in my novel. But Jeremiah, he actually curses the Baal worship that's going on in Carthage. And then there's a massive storm that blows them from Carthage and just sort of catapults them away from Africa. And they're not sure where they are at first, but it turns out that they are in Italy. And in that time, it would have been the Roman kingdom. And Jeremiah makes many prophecies about Rome. He heavily talks about Baal worship and Rome's connection to Baal, and how Rome will conquer, not with swords, but with deception. And I found that, Pat, very fascinating, especially if you think about Roman Catholicism, but I won't go down that rabbit trail too much.
It was a couple quick questions. Would Britain be one of the Isles of Tarshish?
Yes. Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting to refer once more to the Travels of Noah into Europe. According to that book, Baal worship actually originated from, I guess, modern Tunisia over there, the Carthage area. So it's kind of interesting that it shows up in that book as well.
Oh yeah, Tephi they talk about the obelisks that they see, and Tephi knows that what the obelisks actually represent as far as Baal worship and what the obelisks. We won't go down that rabbit hole. But as far as Britain goes, it was known, especially at that time, to be incredibly wealthy in the tin trade. And from what I understand is that Tarshish was known, and the Isles of Tarshish was known for the tin trade. So there's a connection there. And Tephi even mentions that the Lord that they encounter when they get to England, and that's sort of fast forwarding things, but they actually stop in England first. He is incredibly wealthy because of the tin trade that he has going on there. Okay, so they leave Rome and they make it to their next port, which is where they were originally headed, and that is called Mons Calpe. Might be pronouncing that wrong, but it is essentially modern day Gibraltar. The people there, and Tephi explains this, the people in Gibraltar are the tribe of Gad. They're Gadites, one of the lost tribes of Israel. They are there for approximately 5 months, and a whole lot of things happen while they're there. I'm not going to go into all the details, but Tephi and Jeremiah teach the people not to worship Melcath, that is Poseidon or Neptune. And Eiler, who is the ruler of Gibraltar, he gives Tephi Poseidon's trident after they end up tearing that idol down. And he actually calls her like idol toppler because of her work in steering the people away from idols and bringing them back to the truth of Yah. And slight spoiler alert, Baruch dies in Gibraltar. So it's kind of sad. Next, they leave there and head to Brogan, which is in A Coruna, Spain. Tephi refers to it as Brogan, but in antiquity, it was also called Britannia. There is a tower there now called the Tower of Hercules, as you can see in the picture. But there's that statue, that fellow in the front is actually Brogan. In the legend, Brogan founded the city and built the tower, and his son Ith sees Ireland from the top of the tower and sets forth to conquer. In Tephi's story, Ith is actually the king of Brogan at the time. And Ith, just like Pharaoh Hapra, he adopts Tephi as his very own. Ith speaks a lot about his son Lugade. This is Lu. He is missing. And we encounter the first of our Irish mythology here. The story of Brogan and the story of Ith is featured in Irish mythology. And Lu is one of the gods of the Tuatha De Danann. But we'll get more into the mythology a little later. They leave Brogan with the goal of going to Ireland, but they encounter another storm and they are totally blown off course and land in Marazion, which is actually in present day Cornwall. It's still called Marazion today. Tephi calls, this is England, Tephi calls England Albion, which makes me think of King Arthur's legends. But Marazion actually means bitter for Zion. It's a Hebrew word. It's not a British word. Eletha is the ruler of Marazion.
It seems like a lot of Celtic words have Hebrew connections.
Yeah, there's a lot that could be deciphered, and it sounds very similar in a lot of ways. I mean, obviously, over the centuries, it's been changed, but there's a lot of Hebrew sounds going on there. So they head for Ireland, and I said they ended up in England instead. Now, Eletha, the ruler, he actually says that it is a good thing that they went to Albion before Eru. Eru is the old word for Ireland, because Ireland is in upheaval. There are countless bandits and raiders terrorizing the land. The clan lords are feuding regularly, and they're horribly greedy. They place incredibly heavy taxes on the common people. And, here we are with taxation again. This is a big deal. The people really want a high king who can control the raiders and, pull in the reins on the greedy clan lords. But one high king has not been selected yet. Eletha, he is the lord in England. He is going to contact the clan lords in Ireland and let them know that the Queen of Judah is going to be arriving. That way Tephi can be protected. The clan lords respond back. They're very excited to welcome her. They send gifts of silver and gold and jewelry. And one lord even sends his family heirloom, which is called the Son of Helen. And this is Helen of Troy. It is a family heirloom handed down to him from the Trojan War. So again, there's that connection of the Zerah line of Judah being in Troy, and now they have migrated eventually over to Ireland also. Many of these clan lords propose marriage to Tephi, and it is decided that because of her royal lineage, that whoever it is that Tephi marries will become the first High King of Eru, or Ireland. And so Tephi finally makes it to Ireland, but before she leaves, Jeremiah departs on a different path. He takes the ark and some of the temple treasures, and he leaves Tephi the Bethel Stone. And Tephi, she's terribly grieved by this because she actually views Jeremiah as a father at this point. But this is the first time in all of her wanderings that Tephi actually gets to travel as a queen. Aletha has prepared a full fleet, and the ships are beautifully decorated. And he sends his son, this is Brez, or Brez the Beautiful, as he is known in the Irish mythology. Brez and Aletha are both prominent in Irish mythology. And Brez the Beautiful, he's quite a character, and we're going to hear more about him later. But she arrives, and there are countless soldiers and people to greet her, and the bards are singing her praises. It's a really beautiful scene. And she first is greeted by someone named Ethan, and he is recognized as being the most talented bard in all the land. And then there's another person that she meets, and I won't go into too much about who he is, because that would be major spoiler alerts. But Ethan is the chief bard to Lord Araman, sometimes pronounced Herman. And he is one of the favored lords to be the High King. Both of these characters play very heavily in the Irish mythology, but it's a little bit tricky with them. Their names aren't specifically mentioned. Some of the names I said are exactly the same, and some people are more like an amalgamation of a couple different characters. And we'll cover more of that in a little bit later. But the name I used for Ethan because, well, I have reasons, but it's Yoathna. And he creeps up later again. But Tephi from there is taken to Drum Cain, and this is that means beautiful hill. It is now known as the Hill of Tara, but there will be evidence later that it was originally called the Hill of Torah. But at present day, it's the Hill of Tara. On the Hill of Tara presently is an obelisk, as you can see in the top picture there. The people claim that this obelisk is the Leophale or the Bethel Stone. It is not the Leophale or the Bethel Stone. Now, when Tephi first gets to the Hill of Tara, there is a huge obelisk to Baal. It has a bull's head, there's a sun disk on top, and she's horribly offended by this. And eventually, Tephi has this obelisk torn down, and because it's so huge, the men just cart it off not terribly far away, and they bury it. And that's what happens in the book of Tephi. In Tephi's story, they bury this obelisk. Later, this obelisk was found and put in that spot, and that is the obelisk that Tephi had torn down. That is actually an obelisk to Baal. What Tephi had put in that space was the Bethel Stone. Instead of this horrible obelisk to Baal, she wanted the Bethel Stone, the stone of Jacob, put there.
That's interesting. That's interesting because I didn't know anything about that stone there, that obelisk. But some of the obelisks I've looked into, like the one in Rome, for example, it was interesting that according to my research, it was the one right there at St. Peter's, where apparently Peter was Kepha was crucified. That was taken down, but it was re-erected again in, say, like the 1500s. Yeah. And it's interesting because it was such a big stone that they didn't cart it off somewhere. They just buried it, which right then there made people later down the line easier to just, dig it right up and put it back up when they were ready.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened here. And that fake stone, it was found in 1840. But I mean, many people realize that that's not the real one. In fact, you can see the graffiti on there. They write fake. That's not the real stone. But this meeting place, this Hill of Tara, is where
I'm sorry, somebody wasn't a fan. I'm sorry.
Right. I love that one I found. Well, what's fascinating is like the Stone of Destiny, the Bethel Stone, they were supposed to be coronated on it. How is somebody going to sit or stand on that to be coronated? It's not going to work.
It's very uncomfortable.
Yes, exactly. So at Tara, the Hill of Tara, Tephi's husband is selected for her. They actually select him using a bow and arrow. And this whole scene is fascinating. And I don't want to give too many details, please read the book. But The Baal priests, because at the Hill of Tar at the time, it was resided over by these priests of Baal. The Baal priests want to use a bow and arrow from the god Luganus or Longinus. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but he's essentially Cupid. So they're trying to select Tephi's husband using Cupid's arrow. It fails. And they bring forth the Danites, the Tuatha De Danann, bring forth Samson's bow. And this is the biblical Samson, the Samson judge who was a Danite. That's why they have his bow, because it's the tribe of Dan. And in the book of Tephi, which is really fascinating, it's actually spelled, Samson is spelled with a P. So there's your Mandela effect.
Nice.
But during the process, this is when the obelisk to Baal is destroyed. It's broken, and that's when Tephi has it removed. And at that time, many of the Tuatha De Danann repent and begin worshiping Yah. Now, the Fomorians who happen to be there, they cling to Baal. They don't want to worship Baal at all. So you're starting to see these factions forming. One side's going to continue to worship Baal, and the other side is going to start worshiping Yah. And then Tephi, who her husband turns out to be, because Samson's bow works, I'm not going to tell you because it's really, really remarkable. And it could only have been orchestrated by Yahweh. And you're just going to have to read the book to find that one out. But during this time, we're introduced to some other Celtic mythology people. We have Balor. He is fascinating. He is Balor of the evil eye, Balor of the mighty blows. And his wife is Sethleen of the crooked teeth, which I don't know if you want that moniker, but, you know, Sethleen of the crooked teeth. Noauda, and there's various spellings of his name, but he is Noauda of the silver arm. And then Agma is a great warrior. In Deech, Turin, there's Dian Checht. He is a great healer. And Gavnu is a great swordsmith. And Lukta is a carpenter. And Credna is a brazier. So he makes like bronze work. Some of these people are only mentioned briefly in Tephi's story, but they do feature in the Irish mythology. And also some of the names are going to be spelled different. Some of the pronunciations will be different, but they're very close. And it's fascinating to me how closely everything is lining up to the Second Battle of Moytoira. So after Tephi is married, people come forward and they want to test her and they want to test the Torah, because that is what she's going to use as her governing book. Her rule book, her law book is going to be the Torah. So using Torah principles, Tephi makes many just rulings, and the people are super impressed with how she's ruling. And the Baal worshippers, they're pretty salty about all this. Sibra comes forward and brings an accusation against Brez the Beautiful. And Brez, he is currently a lord in the northern part of Iru, which is like the Ulster area. But he is greedy and evil. And you'll see we've got the current flag of Ulster. Well, that's actually the older one, but the flag of Ulster is the red hand. There is a very strong connection to the red hand and Zara, Ben Judah, who had the red thread tied around his wrist in his birth. And then the other flag is the Irish nationalist flag, which actually has the harp on it. And in my opinion, that's the harp of King David. So this Brez the Beautiful character, he's a horrible lord. He's taxing his people to the point of starvation. He is a Baal worshiper. He is into a whole bunch of sexual debauchery. He's just not a good guy. And he only became lord after that Nauda of the Silver Hand was injured during the first battle of Moytoira. The Tuatha De Danann thought that their ruler had to be physically perfect. So they took Nauda of the Silver Hand off of the lordship and gave it to Brez the Beautiful. But Nauda of the Silver Hand is actually really interesting. He has a silver arm that was made for him, and it's like this mechanical working. It's pretty cool. So Tephi informs the people that according to the Torah, only the high priest needs to be perfect, and that a lord governing a land could have a physical malady. So it's not a problem for Nauda the Silver Arm to be a lord in Eru. And the people are screaming. They want to get rid of Brez the Beautiful. They want to bring Nauda back. So Tephi, to try to be fair and impartial, she lets the people decide. Everyone is given a stone with which to cast lots, and it doesn't take very long before Nauda's pile of stones is huge. Brez the Beautiful's is very small. The people overwhelmingly want Nauda. And furious, Brez swears revenge against Tephi, even though she actually never cast a lot. It was the will of the people. And so Brez, because of this revenge, he instigates all of the Baal worshippers to come against Tephi. And this is going to lead to this second battle of Moytoira. Some other events occur before the battle actually takes place. You know, the factions are gathering allies on both sides. Brez goes to his father. He was, remember, the lord in England. And Elatha, his father, refuses to go against God's chosen. He says, I'm not going to fight with you. Tephi is from God, and this is a bad idea. But Brez doesn't listen, and he gathers all of the Baal worshippers. Tephi, meanwhile, encounters Lu, who was her adopted brother from Brogan, and he has been living in Eru this whole time. And Lu, he's a mighty, mighty warrior. He pledges to become her champion, and he actually brings his army with him to help in this battle. There are some fun incidents involving Lu that are very humorous because he is considered the jack of all trades, like he's really good at everything. And for the most part, Brez's side is these Fomorians, the Baal worshippers, whereas Tephi's side just consists of the common people, the Tuatha De Danann. So, and then there's a scandalous incident that happens, and the repercussions of that actually affect the war, but that happens later. And so they meet for the battle on Samhain, which is Halloween, and it's a high feast to Baal. So I think the enemy is thinking that they can gather strength because they're meeting on Samhain. The first part of the war is single combat between the champions. So sort of picture Goliath out in the middle of the pitch, casting his insults, and then David eventually goes out. And that's basically what happens is somebody comes out to the middle of the pitch and casts insult, and then somebody goes in to battle this person. Tephi's side, the Tuatha De Danann, they are winning way more victories than the other side. And so the other side, the Baal side, they kind of want to speed this process up and make the battle break out wide because they have way more forces in their army than the Tuatha De Danann do. So Brez the Beautiful comes out into the pitch and he starts instigating Lu. But Lu, the people won't let Lu fight. And there's a whole backstory to that. Like they are physically holding him back. But during the insult, Brez is starting to say horrible things about Tephi. Someone else runs out into the pitch. And I'm not going to say who that is. Got to read the book. But Brez knocks this person out, but he doesn't kill him. He like places his shield over this person to protect them. And someone else from the Baal side sneaks and kills this person by ramming. They're knocked out unconscious. They ram a spear through his heart. And it's such treachery that all the armies come in and start fighting together. The battle breaks out wide. And, you know, just like any good story, the momentum switches back and forth. And eventually, very, very important people die. I'm not going to say who. And of course, there's a moment where all hope seems lost. And then there's the epic climax of the battle. And I will say it's very epic in Tephi's story, but I admittedly, you know, took some creative liberties here to make the battle even more epic. But even though the battle is over, there's still some drama that plays out. But eventually, Tephi, along with Jeremiah, return to the hill of Tara. And that's where Torah becomes the law of the land. And that's why I think it was the hill of Torah, which eventually became the hill of Tara. And according to the book of Tephi, she had 4 children. Her oldest son died while he was still pretty young. In 1955, the Irish archaeologist Sean P. O'Riordan found what he believed to be the skeleton of this son. He was a male around teenage years wearing Egyptian beads. And the theory is that these beads were Tephi's that she got from her time in Egypt. Then Tephi had a daughter who marries Nuada of the Silver Arm's grandson. And she had a 3rd child, Angus, who eventually becomes king. And her 4th child actually isn't mentioned too much in the mythology. So diving into the mythology a little bit, because we're going to see how much it really mirrors Tephi's story. The Tuatha De Danann, they were described as a supernatural race, like idealized humans. They were immune from aging and sickness, and they had magic powers. The Fomorians were described, again, as a supernatural race, but they were horrible, hostile, monstrous beings, and they were said to come from the sea. Many of the characters are directly named. And then, like I said, some were more amalgamations that, like specifically Tephi and her husband aren't directly named. And they seem to be a combination of a couple of different characters. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go over everybody, but there's Noelhadley the silver arm or silver hand, and he was Tuatha De Danann. He lost his arm in the first battle, and Brez is his replacement. He gets a fully functioning silver arm. He's associated with fishing and hunting, and he had a wife named Boand, and she was the Bonny River that runs through Ireland is named after her. And he had a magical sword of light, and that is one of the 4 treasures of the Tuatha De Danann. The sword of light makes its wielder unbeatable. And then we have Bailor of the Evil Eye. He's Bailor of the Mighty Blows. He's supernatural eye that he only opens during battles and kills everyone he looks at and causes everything to burst into flames. It's sort of reminded me of like DEW or a do, you know. He's linked to like the Cyclops in Greek mythology or even Odin because of the one eye thing. And his wife is Sethlina the Crooked Teeth. There's Brez the Beautiful. He's half Tuatha De Danann and half Fomorian, but he favored the Fomorian side and joined their forces. He was evil, greedy, and cruel. And he made the Tuatha De Danann his slaves basically through heavy taxation. Let's see. Okay, there's the Lu. He was a member of the Tuatha De Danann, a warrior, master of all things, and considered a savior. He's associated with oaths, truths, and proper law. He's nicknamed the Long Arm because of his feats of strength. And he wielded a magic spear that was another one of the 4 treasures of the Tuatha De Danann. The spear never missed its mark, and it always came back to him, and it kind of makes me think of Thor's hammer Mjolnir. Now, the Dagda, he's one of the people.
Do you have a proposal for the origin of the spear? I mean, you had Samson's bow and David's harp.
Yeah, we're going to cover that in a second. So the Dagda is one of the people I think that accumulates to make Tephi's husband. And I think the Dagda is more of a title than an actual name. He's considered like a fatherly figure. He's associated with fertility, strength, and agriculture. He has a magic staff or club that can kill with one hand, but the other hand brings life. He's sometimes described as a bit oafish, and he has a harp that can control men's emotions. His harp, or perhaps the harpist himself, is named Uethna, and he has a magical cauldron that never runs dry. And the cauldron, the Undry, is another one of the 4 treasures of the Tuatha De Danann. This other guy, Araman or Yachid, is another person that sort of combines to make Tephi's husband. And there's a lot of people that have that name, Araman and Yachid, throughout the mythologies. But some of the important traits are that he establishes the capital at Tara. He's married to someone, and there's so many names for her. It's Tamar, TEIA TEPHI. I mean, you might as well just say Tephi. He's the first High King of Ireland, and he's often compared to King David. And then the Morrigan is who I believe Tephi is named after, or who becomes Tephi in the mythology. The Morrigan is the Great Queen, the Phantom Queen. She's associated with war and fate. She can appear as a crow or a bav. She incites men to battle and influences them to do courageous deeds. She's often depicted as a trio of women or sisters. And this was interesting. Tephi's sisters are named Bavba and Macha, and those are the names that are mostly associated with the Morrigan. Tephi, other possibilities for Tephi is the goddess Danu. The Irish variant could be Anna, but Danu means streams of water or waters from heaven. Now, little is known about the goddess Danu, and the scholars try to claim that this is where the Tuatha De Danann get their name, is because they worship this goddess Danu. That's just what scholars say. Another possibility is the goddess Bow, or Teltia. Teltia was a divine origin daughter of the King of Spain, married to King Yachid, and foster mother to Lu. And she actually is the one who instructs Lu to hold games for her on the anniversary of her death. So that's just some of the mythology and how it directly connects to Tephi's story. Now, the 4 treasures of the Tuatha De Danann, these are magical items. You have the Lia Fail, which is the Bethel Stone, the Spear of Lu, the Sword of Light, and the Undry Cauldron. The Tuatha De Danann brought these items with them when they migrated to Ireland from 4 island cities located far in the north. And I'll butcher the names, but it's Murias, Phalias, Gorius, and Findius. And I was just thinking 4 island cities. Now, this is totally my speculation, but it kind of made me think of the Rupus Nigra in the center and then the 4. I mean, could that be possible? I don't know. That's just sort of what popped into my mind when I learned about that. Now, Jeremiah in Ireland, he supposedly died in Ireland at 581 BC, right around there. And this is approximately 2 years after the Great Battle. The theory is that he hid the ark in Ireland, possibly around the mound of hostages at Tara, but the ark was never found there. Some believe that Juan Wyatt discovered the ark, as you mentioned, back in the 80s. And I said I don't personally believe that story, but I won't go down that trail right now. Like I said, the ark was never discovered at Tara. However, I will say this: if we are post-millennial kingdom, and we are in the time of Satan's little season, then the ark would have already been taken by Yeshua, so it wouldn't be there for them to find. So, I
wasn't going to bring that up, but since you did mention it, I mean, I was thinking this whole time that it's interesting how you see these relics like David's harp and Samson's bow and all that back then, and it's like, well, where did it all go, right? Yeah. And it makes sense that they would have taken it. Yeah, if excavated, yeah.
During the Millennial Kingdom, they would take it all. Yeah.
Now the stone. So I'm taking it that you never once brought up the stone of scone. So I take it.
We're going to connect to that.
Okay, I don't want to give that away, but okay.
So some other clues that Jeremiah might have actually been in Ireland is there's a character who creeps up in the mythology called the Olam Father. And this is more of a character or a title than an actual name. The characteristics of him are the wise sage, the revealer of knowledge, the lawgiver, the creator of excellent institutions. Olam Fadler's laws bear a striking similarity to the 10 Commandments and other Hebrew statutes. It is theorized that he is buried in the tomb of Carnti at Lucru. The hieroglyphics in that tomb could depict the journey of Jeremiah and Tephi to Ireland. Won't go into all those details right now. Some claim that this tomb is much too old, that it would be a Stone Age tomb. I don't know. Another character who creeps up in the legend is Yarbanel the prophet. He is called the Gray Hero, mighty in spells and verse, fair and just, the true prophet, a miracle worker. His name means son of God. And it would take too long to go into all the history of Yarbanel, but if we break down just the name, something interesting kind of unfolds. Jeremiah's name in the Hebrew is Yirmiyahu. Yirmiyahu abbreviated is Yirmiyah, which means Yah establishes. Just the part year in Hebrew is made up of the Yod and the Resh, and this could easily be Yar, as in Yarbanel. Ben or Ban, as we know, means son, and then El is Elohim, God. So Yarbanel is Jeremiah, son of God. I just think that's really, really fascinating that here's these two people that I think highlight Jeremiah very well that creep up in the mythology. There's a lot more about possibility of Jeremiah in Ireland. I'm not going to go into all that. I'd be happy if somebody wants to email me. I'll give you the links. You can go down that rabbit trail yourself. Now we get back to the Leophale or the Stone of Scone or the Bethel Stone or Jacob's Pillar. So I talked about how the Leophale sitting in Ireland on the hill of Tara is not the real stone. So what happened to the real stone? According to Tephi, the stone remained in Ireland. And then according to other scholars like Iram and Campt, who wrote the book Jacob's Pillar, the stone stayed in Ireland for close to 1,000 years before being moved to Scotland for the coronation of Fergus Mór Mac Éirc. Generations of Scottish kings were coronated on the stone, until it was taken by King Edward I of England in 1296. And this is the very same King Edward the Longshanks of Braveheart fame. The picture there shows the stone. It was sort of like a purplish color, like a sandstony purplish color, and had these rings on the sides that the people would put a pole through to carry it. And there was like a groove made from them carrying. You can almost imagine that that groove was because they carried it through the wilderness all those years. I don't know, but that is the theory. In recent history, the stone was stolen by Scottish nationalists in 1950 prior to the coronation of Elizabeth II. Now, we are told that the stone was returned to England for Elizabeth's coronation. However, the conspiracy theorists believe a replica was sent in its place, and the real stone still remains in Scotland to this day. I fall into the camp of the conspiracy theorist. In my opinion, Elizabeth II is not any sort of Judean, just my opinion. And the whole synagogue of Satan pops into my head again, but I digress. I'm not going to talk about that. So where did the actual bloodline of...
Not a fan of the Queen of England, huh?
No, not even a little bit. I have Irish descent. I don't like England. I'm kidding. England's great. So nonetheless, the stone or the replica goes underneath the throne in England. So you can see it there in the one picture. That's how they put the stone of Scone or the Bethel Stone. And they claim that they are of the line of Israel. Now, another interesting side note is that professors from Yale and Ontario universities have studied the stone and say that a stone like this type of material, this stone, is not found in the British Isles, that the most likely origin for it is from Palestine. So that's kind of interesting. So the takeaway for me, and the storyline seems to be playing out now. People are being oppressed today. In the world now, they're being oppressed by Baal worshipers. The taxation is unbelievable, and the rulers are tyrants and sexual deviants and checking off all those boxes. So just like Tephi's story, the people, they're going to choose. Do you want to follow Baal or do you want to follow Yah? Do they want to elect leaders who are obviously evil or leaders who espouse good? Do I think our votes count? Not necessarily. But I think it has more to do than with our vote. I think it has more to do with our heart. I think of it like being a generous giver. If I see the homeless person on the side of the road, do I give them my $20 or do I go, oh, they might just use it to buy drugs? It's kind of the same thing. My heart in the matter is I want to cast my vote for the person who's going to be espousing good. I by no means, I am not a Trump fan. But I look at his platform and I can't help but wonder. I mean, he wants to eliminate taxes for tariffs. He wants to drastically downsize government control. He wants to put things back in the states. He wants to eliminate mainstream mockingbird media. He wants the Department of Indoctrination, education, to be done away with. He wants to bring prayer and Bible back. He wants to disclose a lot of the secrets that are being kept from us, like the JFK files and the Epstein list and the 9/11, what actually happened there. The only thing is missing is what the truth is behind what all of NASA is doing. But, he wants RFK to reform health and nutrition. All of these things are a very good platform. Do I trust Trump and the whole Q movement? No. I've been awake too long to trust any man, but especially not one as famous and privileged as Trump. But I do think that Yah can work through people. That being said, though, do I think Trump could be part of a much bigger psyop? Yes, I certainly do. But I'm going to trust Yah on this journey. Now, aside from that, I think the biggest takeaway that I want to leave everybody with is, who is Israel? My whole goal for writing Tephi was for people to realize who they are. Israel is not that sliver of land in the Middle East. It's not just the Jews. Israel is all the tribes: Judah, Dan, Benjamin, Reuben, Ephraim, all of them. Yah promised in scripture that Israel will be scattered everywhere. And there's provable evidence of this scattering. And I think Tephi's story is just one more piece of that evidence of the lost tribes existing elsewhere, especially in Europe. I plan on writing more novels that will highlight the tribes being scattered. And if you happen to have any Irish blood in you, there's a good chance that you're a scattered Israelite from either Dan or Judah. And because of Yeshua's work on the cross, the scattered Israelites can come back in covenant. We can come back into covenant with Yah. And what does that mean? Well, that's the marriage covenant. Those are the vows. That is, if you do my commandments, I will bless you. 1 John 5, 2-5. By this we know that we love the children of Yah, when we love Yah and keep his commandments. For this is the love of Yah, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not grievous. For whosoever is born of Yah overcomes the world, and this is the victory that overcomes the world, even our faith. Who is he that overcomes the world, but he that believes Yeshua is the Son of Yah? And ultimately, I believe we are living out the promises of Deuteronomy 30. When all these things come upon you, the blessing and the curse, which I have set before you, and you call them to mind among the nations where Yah your Elohim has driven you, and return to Yah your Elohim, you and your children, and obey his voice in all that I command you today, with all your heart and with all your soul. Then Yah your Elohim will restore your fortunes and have mercy on you, and he will gather you again from all the peoples of Yah your Elohim has scattered you. If your outcasts are in the utmost parts of heaven, and from there Yah your Elohim will gather you, and from there he will take you. And Yah your Elohim will bring you into the land of your fathers, that you may possess it, and he will make you more prosperous and numerous than your fathers. So essentially, I believe that that's what's being played out right now. We are waking up. Mm-hmm. Israel's waking up for wherever we have been scattered, and we are turning back to Yah.
If you write more books on scattered Israel, you should call it the Tephi verse. But I was thinking when we made that comment like an hour ago about how that the people of the Old Testament aren't the Jews, unless we're specifically talking about the tribe of Judah, obviously. What's really interesting is that it really occurred to me that we were making that statement to really an American audience, because if you go to Europe, and as you said, even the Queen of England, the Church of England, claims that they are Israel. And if you look at the flag, the Scottish, the Highlanders, right?
Oh yeah.
You look at the unicorn and their identity with Ephraim and Manasseh, and as well as the UK flag with the lion for Judah and the unicorn. And so you have all around Europe and really the ancient world this understanding that they are Israel. And yet you come over to America in the West where we live, and you try to tell people about that, and this whole idea about our heritage being Israel has been so far removed from us.
Yes.
I don't know if this was a part of the Protestant Reformation or what was going on with this, but it is almost shocking. I remember when I came to that realization several years ago, and it brought me so much joy, because I realized I'm Israel.
Yes.
The Bible is my story. This is my family lineage.
Yes.
Like the book of Genesis is my family quilt going down through the Exodus and so on and so forth. And that brought me a lot of joy, and nobody had ever explained that to me my entire life. I grew up in the church, and so I try to tell this to other Christians, and they're like, "Well, I'm not a Jew. I'm not Israel. I'm
a Gentile." No, you don't want to be a Gentile.
You do not want to be a Gentile. Absolutely, you do not want to be a Gentile. It's never good to be a Gentile. And So
when I was in mainstream Christianity, I remember hearing about these chosen people, the Jews. And I'm like, well, I kind of want to be chosen. It kind of bummed me out. But then when I found out that this is actually our heritage, I'm like, oh, it just, like you said, it just brought me so much joy. And that's so, like, my whole goal of this, and the whole goal of writing Emerald Queen, was to show people, yes, you are Israel.
And I of course, I grew up in dispensationalism as well. And I grew up sad because this idea that I would be told, well, all those commands in the Old Testament, that's for the Jews. The Jews are supposed to keep those. In fact, I would be told that, I grew up with a futurist kind of Zionist perspective of Revelation, that, when Revelation unfolds, the church is taken away and it reverts back to Judaism, and they have to keep the laws and stuff again. And I was kind of sad by that. I'm like, well, why can't I keep the commands? They're like, no, don't keep the commands because you're a Gentile. Don't you dare do that. That's
bad to do what God told you to do.
Yeah. Well, for everyone out there, of course, if you didn't pick up on this now yet, Jennifer Hartz, the book you wrote, Emerald Queen, is obviously it's a work of fiction, but it's based on actual, myth, legend, history, or his story. And do you want to tell us a little bit about Jennifer Hartz approached me? I don't know how long ago it was now, a few months ago. I lose track of time. Half a year. I don't really know. And she came to me with the proposition of starting a fictional wing of the Unexpected Cosmology. For anyone listening, if you do not know, I mean, I realize I have a lot of almost like not damage control, but publicity really that I fall short of. A lot of people don't realize how many books we actually put out. Mm-hmm. And the book you were mentioning about TEIA TEPHI, the whole time I'm like, oh, I need to go edit that and put that out now. But Jennifer, you are the editor-in-chief of Shelves of Shalom publication or publishing, and which is an imprint of the Unexpected Cosmology. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. And well, the reason why I approached you in the first place is I actually heard you talk about TEIA TEPHI in some of your broadcasts. So I was like, Noel's going to love this. But then I knew how much nonfiction work that you had. And I think there is a place for Torah keepers and fiction novels. There is not an entity like that out there. I mean, there are some Torah keepers that may have written some fiction novels, but there is not an actual home for that. Now, Shelves of Shalom is going to focus on Torah-based fiction, but not solely. Like, it could be Christian or it could be secular, just as long as it doesn't contradict scripture. And I was so blessed because
yes, for the writers out there, if you're telling us, if you're in the book, you say don't keep the Sabbath or
we're not looking for Hallmark Christmas stories. No, that would not fly. We're not going to have people chowing down on ham dinner or anything like that. But I was so blessed because I knew what kind of cover artist I wanted to work with, and I found Kim Gillum through the Unexpected Cosmology, and she and I have come together and made such a wonderful team. Now she's probably glaring at me through the computer right now because she just looked at the visual presentation I put forth, and I can almost hear her saying, "Why didn't you let me do it?" I'm sorry, Kim. I only just finished it yesterday, so I didn't have time to send it to you. But we're looking for writers that have that. Torah keepers are a plus, but not a necessity. And I think it's just a wonderful compliment and a place for Torah keepers to find quality fiction novels to read.
Rebecca is the same way with me, and she is the editor at Tuck. She puts out a lot of books, and she tells me all the time, why didn't you let me edit that? I'm like, well, I just it's hot off the press 2 hours ago, and then I went live. So I don't think you had time to go back and forth for a week on this, and to put aside all your other work too. So of course. Yeah, and Jennifer, of course, you really inspired me because I've always loved fiction. I used to read hundreds and hundreds of fiction back in the day, and as you just mentioned, I write nonfiction. I write a lot of papers on truther topics and things like that. But when you put forward the idea of starting Shelves of Shalom, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna put my fingerprint on this as well. And so, obviously, that's what I've been doing for the last 3 months. Is I still have hair, but I've been wanting just to pull it out and throw my computer against the wall and hit the delete button and whatever. It's been eventually I'll finish this, but yeah.
That's a process. Yeah, and I got to read the preview of what Noel's working on. And if you've read any of Noel's nonfiction work, he has a fantastic voice in nonfiction. It's even better in fiction. So I'm excited to see it completed.
I would agree with that. Actually, I do think I'm a better fiction writer than a nonfiction. In fact, I'll bring up. Not that I'm throwing Rebecca under the bus, but I spent the whole time. She's always editing, smoking her cigarettes, And so the whole time I'm writing this, every sentence, I'm imagining, well, Rebecca, I'm imagining her smoking her cigarette, like zeroing in on will she like this or hate it? And she was really nervous for a couple months because she's like, I don't know how your work is going to translate to fiction. And I was so pleased when she read the preview as well, and she really loved it. So I think everyone's no, this isn't about me, this is about your book, but and so I'm excited to premiere this with Shelves of Shalom, TEIA TEPHI. And was there anything else you wanted to add, Jennifer, before we
I think that's it. Just check out Emerald Queen. It is fantastic. You feel free to email me at Shelves of Shalom. I'm sure we'll put the links below the video here.
It's for sale right now through the bookstore at the Unexpected Cosmology. And we are, I don't like Amazon at all. I am working with Amazon. We're going to make this relationship work, but Amazon and I do not get along too well. They actually closed my entire account several months ago, and I was able to get it up again. But but anyways, so everybody, you can come check out. You can get the book. It's at the Unexpected Cosmology at our website. We have a whole bookstore there, and Emerald Queen is included. Anything else, Jennifer?
No, I think that's it. Just thank you so much for letting me give my spiel today.
Yeah, that was really good. I thought you tackled that excellently. I mean, you're clearly very well researched on that.
I was really nervous because that's the first time I ever did any presentation like that. So I'm glad it went over well.
You were telling me you were nervous for days, and I was nervous for you. I was just like all day, I was nervous about Jennifer coming on and be like, I'm nervous for you. So, all right, well, we're going to close, and you guys are going to see the trailer on the way out, and you hit the link, like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit the link and go to the store, check it out. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.